Greetings from the cosmic horde. The stars are right once again, and the great old ones allow us to talk about for 30 plus minutes H.P. Lovecraft, the horror writer who's a genre unto himself. I'm your cosmic host, Mark Griffin, executive of the Lovecraft Estate on Yaga, joined in by two from Material World, David Guffey, a professor at Miskatonic University, and Richard Wilson, who is experiencing fear and loathing in Arkham County. Our guest today is outlaw poet and nominee for a Nobel Prize in Literature and Kentucky's unofficial poet laureate, Ron Whitehead. He's the author of such books as The Beaver Dam Rocking Chair Marathon. And he's joining us to talk about the gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson. Welcome to our show.
Cthulhu dances circles round the subterranean gloom, paints pink and blue and purple until he fills the world with the smell of roses and a pandemonium moon. What's going on, guys? Hi.
Good to hear from you.
It's good to be here. I'm honored to be on the program. It's good to be back connected with Russellville, Kentucky, which is a stone's throw from Bowling Green, where John Carpenter, who was heavily influenced by Lovecraft, as you and everybody listening knows, my favorite film by Carpenter was the original Escape from New York, 1981.
Right. Yeah, it's a classic there.
So,
it is.
So I read Lovecraft and Crowley and Poe and the people who influenced Lovecraft and the people who were influenced by him, including Colin Wilson. Have you the Mind Parasites, the Space Vampires, The Outsider?
Mm-hmm.
He wrote over 100 books. I read at least 70 of them. And he first denigrated Lovecraft as a bad writer, and then he praised him and honored him. So, but he's had a major influence, Lovecraft. And here I am talking about it, H.P. Lovecraft, and I've been invited to talk about Hunter S. Thompson. But they're both, fear is an ever-present it's at center stage, in their works. So it's unavoidable, fear and loathing.
And you knew Hunter S. Thompson, and he gave you a very memorial description of you. And
I was honored. I name one other poet who Hunter S. Thompson praised. Can you think of one?
Yeah,
I can't. I can't. In writing, I can't. So it was a great honor to receive that letter. I received a call from a young man in New York City who had a publishing house, and they were publishing the Beaver Dam Rocking Chair Marathon, he and his partner. And he said, "Ron, are you sitting down?" And I said, "No, but I obviously should be." And he said, "I just received a letter, handwritten, from your friend Hunter S. Thompson, and I'd like to read it to you." And he said, he read, "I have long admired Ron Whitehead. He is crazy as 9 loons." That's a great compliment from Hunter right there. I love that. "And his poetry is a dazzling mix of folk wisdom and pure mathematics." And Hunter had the greatest respect for mathematics. And so it was, in December the 12th, 1996, I had the great honor of producing the official Hunter S. Thompson tribute at Memorial Auditorium on 4th Street in Louisville, Kentucky. That's where Hunter wanted to have it. And I brought in Hunter, Johnny Depp, Warren Zevon, Werewolves of London, Lawyers, Guns and Money, David Amram, historian Douglas Brinkley, and a whole lot of other people. Hunter's mom, Virginia, who I became friends with at the end of her life, his son, Juan, Roxanne Pulitzer, and others. Standing room only event. And the University of Louisville, where I taught, was teaching at the time, had agreed to be the executive producers. In other words, put up the money for the event. All I had to do was produce it, and I had an army of young people, mostly college students, who helped me. And a week before the event, though, I got the message from one of the vice presidents at U of L that they had decided to back out because of they were afraid that their primary donors would quit giving because of all of what they considered to be adverse publicity, because of the feature articles that had been written in the Courier Journal, the Lexington Herald, and a growing number of other publications around the country and the world that all mentioned the use of drugs and heavy drinking. And so it ended up this spectacular 4-hour event. I've produced a few thousand events in Europe and the United States, and this one is just right up there at the top. We were celebrating the 25th anniversary of the release of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And the event made $100,000. No, it cost $100,000. We made $50,000. So I ended up getting stuck with $50,000 debt. Now I produced all these events, and all but a handful have made a little, lost a little, broke even. If they made a little, I always put the money back into producing more, into publishing. For several years there in the 90s, I was teaching at 2 different colleges because I put half the money into my creative projects. I was teaching 10 or 11 classes a semester. Imagine, oh my God, 3 a.m., no sleep, papers stacked all over the floors. How am I going to grade all these papers? But I'm also producing 3 or 4 events a week and publishing 3 or 4 titles a month. And so I really didn't know what the hell I was going to do. It took me 20 years to pay that debt off, but 3 or 4 years ago, I finally got it paid off. And people constantly say, "You in Kentucky, you could have bought a house for that." And I said, you know what? I've thought about it many times because I didn't know what to do afterwards. And I said, if I had to do over, I'd do it again. It was worth it to me. And when Hunter wrote that, he knew what had happened. He knew the story. And I think that was a way for him to show me how much he appreciated it. He watched the film of that event for the rest of his life, to his death, February 20th, 2005, when he shot himself. And
so is that why he called you Crazy's 9 Loons for that?
well, that was one reason, but we had a respect for each other. I consider Hunter and the Dalai Lama to be teachers, great teachers on opposite ends of the teaching spectrum. And I've said that before, and people will look at me like, Hunter S. Thompson's a teacher. What the hell are you talking about? But he really was. But he was more like a Zen master teacher who would walk behind the students with his bamboo stick and smack the hell out of them. Any that had fallen asleep, smack them on the back to wake them up and yell, "Wake up!" And Hunter was like that. He had the eyes. He saw like a poet sees. He saw into people and events and situations. And in an instant, he got the whole picture. He knew what the score was. And he was a visionary. I read all his works, and I encourage people all the time. I've studied all the works of George Orwell, and the 1984, which was published in 1949, his last book, is a literary masterpiece. And I encourage people that, yes, that was a visionary work. Other works were as well. But read it at least also for the literary aspects of it, and do the same with Hunter's works, especially and primarily the early works and the letters. Those are his great works as far as I'm concerned, starting with Hell's Angels.
So how did you first get introduced to Hunter S. Thompson's work?
Well, I grew up on a farm in Ohio County, up the road from you all, where Bill Monroe birthed bluegrass music across the Green River, where my distant cousins, the Everly brothers, learned pretty much they ever knew from Ike Everly, who was a barber there in Brownie, which was adjacent to Drakesboro, which was near Paradise. And their dad, the Everly brothers' dad, would take them to Mose Rager's barbershop. And Mose was a friend of my grandfather's. I grew up in a musical family. My mom's 91. She's the oldest of 13. And something's going to happen here in this interview, and it's happened to me. I used to have to ask my students, see, life is a tangent and all things show it. I thought so once, but now I know it. So if I get out on a limb, I may ask you where we started so you can bring me back in again. Oh God.
Nothing less from you.
That won't be the first time that's happened on this.
Right.
We've got a few limbs.
Yeah. And I have lived several lifetimes, many lifetimes in this one. I'm 72 now. Just restate that question one more time, please.
How did you first get introduced to Hunter S. Thompson's work?
Okay, so on the farm. Well, Daddy was a coal miner for 43 years. I worked at the mines 3 times myself. But I understood early on when I was 7, actually, that I was born to be a poet. And so that was the path I pursued, come hell or high water, no matter what. That's where I was going. And so Daddy was a farmer, a coal miner, but he dropped out of school in the 10th grade. And I told my college students, first day of class, when you get your college degree, doors will open for you. You'll have opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise, but don't ever think that you're better or smarter than anybody else, because some of the smartest and wisest people I've ever known never finished high school. So remember remember where you came from. And Daddy loved poetry, and he memorized and recited poems. He loved reading and stories, and he turned me on to the works of Louis L'Amour. I love Westerns, and Jesse Stewart, that great Kentucky writer. And 6 of the 30 books I've written have been about my experiences in Kentucky and about Kentucky. And so Daddy subscribed to different magazines, book clubs. When I was in my early teens, my parents bought us on a payment plan the World Book Encyclopedia. And I read it cover to cover. It's filled with amazing, beautiful color pictures. And but we got Life magazine, Look magazines, these big format magazines, lots of photos and stories. And so that's where I read them cover to cover. I started when I was a boy. I sold Grit magazine door to door on to farmers, and in the little town our farm was a mile and a half outside of Centertown, population 323, and it was through Grit magazine that I saw book clubs and signed up for book clubs, because the mailman back in those days out on the farm was Santa Claus as far as I was concerned, because he could bring stuff in from book clubs from all over the world. Wherever I wrote, I could get a response. So I read all that stuff. And whenever the monthly Reader's Digest came, there was something in it called Word Power. And Daddy would get off work from the mines and he'd say, "Ronnie, come in here." And I would go in and he would call out a word and I had to spell it and give the definition of it. And I was always real proud to get them all right. So I read first about the Beat Generation, what was going on with I think that started with the trial of Ferlinghetti. Lawrence Ferlinghetti had to go to court because the government confiscated Hal and other poems.
Oh,
In the fall of October of '55, there was the 6 poets at Sixth Gallery in San Francisco, and that's where Ginsberg read Hal. And Michael McClure said a line had been drawn in the sand, and everything had changed. Everything was new and different. From now on, it would never be the same. And so Ferlinghetti was there, and he sent Ginsberg a telegram and said, "When do I get the manuscript?" And so he published the book in 1956, and there was a trial, and that made not only the news in our country but in the world. And that really put City Lights Books, 261 Columbus Avenue, North Beach, the mecca for independent editors, publishers, thinkers, poets, writers from around the world, go there to this day. And Ferlinghetti died a little over a year ago. It almost made it to 102. We became friends. I was honored by that. So I started becoming familiar with these people, these free thinkers out there in San Francisco. I was always curious. I wanted to know. And I was reading all about the hippies and everything going on with that out of the gate. I had started listening to, my brother and I had a bedroom, twin beds up in an unfinished attic in our old farmhouse with little holes in the wall where sometimes the wind whistled through from the cedar and pine trees, and snow would filter through in the wintertime. Sometimes there was no heat or air conditioning up there. But we slept up there most of my growing up years. And we had an AM radio on a low light and on a stand between our beds. And I listened to WLS out of Chicago on those every night. And it came in and went out depending on the weather, the clouds. And so I was listening to Bob Dylan and the Stones and the Beatles and the British Invasion from the get-go, because WLS out of Chicago played all those songs. So I was following the youth movement of that time in the 60s. I was born on Thanksgiving Day, November 23rd, 1950, in the midst of the worst blizzard to ever hit Kentucky. And I've been living, it included lightning and thunder. And I've been living in one storm after another ever since. And I love storms. And so then along comes the Hells Angels. And they were really put on the map. There were little articles about them and the fear that they were inflicting on people in California and the terror. And most of the articles coming out about them were copies of what the police had said that journalists were picking up and just reprinting what the police had said, basically. And Hunter was invited to write an article on the Hells Angels for The Nation. That was 65 or 6, right in there. And that got him national publicity as soon as that article came out. His article on the Hells Angels. It was he decided to go meet them and then to ride with them and to get the first hand, which he did for a year, and to get the first hand story.
He got beat up by them, didn't he?
Finally, he said that was it. Yeah, they almost killed him, and it was a close call. And but he got the book, he got the material from it. And so I read about Hunter at the beginning, and then he is the writer who put Rolling Stone magazine on the map. And so when I left home, I graduated high school in '68. I was 17. I left home and I was in the thick of it. I'd already been reading everything I could get my hands on, and I got involved in as much as I could get involved in. And so I went to Greece with a friend of mine, and we home based with his uncle in the suburb of Athens. His uncle was a CIA agent and a Russian expert in charge. He was in charge of escorting Svetlana Alexeyeva, Stalin's daughter, when she defected from the Soviet Union to New Delhi, India. He took her to Rome, where there's a shootout with the KGB. She tells all this story in her book, Only 1 Year, her autobiography. And so I went over there for 3 months exploring all over Greece. And when we got back, we opened an underground bookstore in Lexington on South Lime. And we sold all the books we wanted to sell. I picked them out from City Lights Books and whatever. We sold all the beats, Charles Bukowski, Hunter S. Thompson, first Rolling Stone magazines. Hunter S. Thompson put Rolling Stone magazine on the map with his writing, and he was looked to as the voice of a generation. I mean, he cut through the bullshit, and he did it with extreme wit and wisdom. The Mark Twain of our era, I felt like, and still do. And sometimes people ask me, who's your favorite American writer? And I said, I got so many favorite writers and poets and musicians, and I don't know where to start. But today I'll say Mark Twain. And they looked at me like, Mark Twain? You're the U.S. National Beat Poet Laureate. What the hell are you even mentioning Mark Twain for? Shouldn't you say whoever? And so then I tell them, Mark Twain turned the literary world upside down by making the heroes of his stories hobos and slaves. Who had done that? Nobody. So, and he told it like it was too. And so I became familiar with Hunter and started following him in the 60s and continue to this day. And so
the story that made Hunter a household name was the Kentucky Derby's Decadent and Depraved.
That's right, 1970. Yeah. And he got lined up with Ralph Steadman, the British artist. Some people refer to him as a cartoonist, which is fine. You call him, me, Hunter, whoever, whatever the hell you want to call us. But I just think of Ralph as an artist, and he's a great one too. And Hunter gave him
Hunter a very distinct look, I guess for his stories and his articles, the way his art. You always associate Hunter S. Thompson with Stedman's art.
Absolutely. From the moment they started working together, Kentucky Derby is Decadent and Depraved, and Stedman was of central importance to getting Hunter's name and work on the map. His work was so identifiable and so linked with the stories, with what Hunter was writing. And so Hunter gave Stedman, I think they took mushrooms, and Stedman had never done anything like that. And it really, it had a fantastic influence and impact on his life and work.
And he forgot to bring his inks for that, and he had to use makeup, to make the art.
Lipstick and makeup. Yeah, he's really innovative. And if you haven't had a chance to see one of the best documentaries ever produced, as far as I'm concerned, for no good reason, it's a documentary about Ralph Steadman, his life and his work in particular. It features Johnny Depp and many others. It's a brilliant documentary. Check it out. We premiered it at the 2014 Gonzo Fest we started the Gonzo Fest in 2010. Denny Humphrey and I'd worked for years. Okay, I worked for 26 years to get Louisville, Kentucky hunters' hometown to pay tribute to their native son. And I just did my 10th and final Gonzo Fest. And it was incredible. People came from nearly every state in the Union. And we had it at the High Horse Bar on Main Street. I wanted to keep it at a small venue. We've had as many as 8,000. We had as many as 8,000 people attend those when we had it at the big full walking bridge down on the river. And I brought Denny Humphrey contacted me in 2010 and said, Ron, I want to start a festival honoring hunters' life and work. And I want to start in the Highlands, but I'm not going to do it unless you start it with me. And he knew I'd been trying since 1996 to get somebody to join forces with me. And I was like, one of these old preachers standing on the street corner in small southern towns preaching, nobody listening. And so I was like, oh my God, yes, thanks, Denny, let's do it. But I finally decided, there was a time when I thought, I'm so glad I did all of it. And finally the city came on board in 2014. My friend Gil Holland, who's a big Hunter S. Thompson fan, he's a filmmaker and a book publisher and urban developer. I met him through Hunter. He said he's a fan of Hunter's and mine, and he brought out my 20th book, and he's brought out my last 12 albums through Son of Blast Records. And so in 2014, we had 6 days and nights of Gonzo Fest events in 17 venues throughout Louisville, including we had the world premiere showing of For No Good Reason, the Ralph Steadman documentary. Sony Pictures worked with them out of New York, and they gave me the green light, and I got the green light from the film crew, the film team that had made the film. And I ended up being the racetrack announcer for the 1970 Kentucky Derby in the film. They recorded my voice. They gave me the transcript and recorded my voice. And so you watch the film, you can actually just get that excerpt on YouTube. And the reason is, it's not because it's my voice, it's because Johnny Depp narrates the race. He's reading something. He's reading from the manuscript. Yeah, from Kentucky Derby's Decadent and Depraved, while I'm calling the race, and they show the actual race, and I'm the announcer. So you have to listen over Johnny or between Johnny's words to hear me calling the race. So I ended up getting a signed big poster from Ralph. Thank you for your Ron Whitehead. Thank you for your voice. And I ended up doing a lot of work with Ralph, and he sent me 40-some, 50-some images of Hunter, photographs, but mostly paintings. And I like the image, the first portrait he did of Hunter, the first that Hunter had agreed to sit for. And I liked it the best. And I sent all the images to the production team. We had 6 people on the production team. And I said, y'all choose the top 3. Anyway, we voted, everybody selected that one. And now it's on the, Gil Holland paid for the banner. We wanted to get it on the big photo images down at the downtown high-rise buildings in Louisville, but they have the board of that, the people who select those images of Diane Sawyer and Muhammad Ali and all these other folks who are up on these giant photos. One person voted no, and you had to vote unanimous. Everybody's got to agree unanimously for a person to be selected. And one person said that they thought it would give Louisville a bad image because of Hunter's notoriety for the overuse of drugs and alcohol. And I won't go into express all my feelings, emotions, and I won't cuss and rant and rave and express my point of view on that subject here on this performance, on this interview. But I totally disagree with the guy, you freaking idiot. So if you're listening, and so anyway, Gil Holland put up the money, $5,000 for a huge banner on this, which we got on the side of the Bristol Bar and Grill on Bardstown Road in Hunter's growing up ground there in the Highlands of Louisville. And I asked the mayor to change the name of Louisville I said, why the hell are we named after a French king? Who wants that? I said, let's change the name of Louisville to Hunter's Gonzoville. You know, I knew he wouldn't do it, of course, but I asked him, and by God, he at the unveiling of the banner, he read and made a formal proclamation changing the name of Louisville for the week of Gonzo Fest that week to Hunter's Gonzoville. So I knew this ahead of time, and I asked Ralph if he would splatter paint Hunter's Gonzoville so we could add it to the banner that would go side by side with Hunter's portrait. And it's on the side of the Bristol Bar and Grill. And the reason I put it there is because I used to take a lot of out-of-town guests there. I took Robert Hunter, the lyricist for the Grateful Dead. He called me one day and said, Ron, I got a new book, Box of Rain, coming out, and I'm going to do a tour, and I'd like to start it in Louisville. Diane DePrimas told me all about you. I said, come on. And so I took him to eat there. I brought Allen Ginsberg in October of '92. He was on a special diet. He didn't get in until like 2 a.m. And I got him to the Bristol as they were closing, and they fixed him a special meal. And I've taken a lot of other people. So in '96, I took Hunter twice for dinner. I took Hunter and Johnny Depp and Warren Zevon and a handful of other people to the Bristol for dinner. And they set us up on tables right in the front by the sidewalk where everybody walking by could see who was sitting there in the front window. And people just kept coming up and asking Hunter, not Johnny or Warren Zevon for their autographs, but Hunter Thompson. And Hunter at one point took his glass of Chivas Regal with ice in it and just threw the whole damn thing over his head, just straight back. And I'm just like, please, no, don't hit anybody in the head, please. And he took his steak knife and just at another point he just slammed it and stuck it right in the table there, and it just stayed there the rest of the dinner while we ate and talked. But I wanted to have the banner put on a recognizable location that has a historic connection, and 22,000 people, City of Louisville told me, drive by the banner each day and see it. So I'd rather have it in the Highlands than on one of those damn downtown high rises anyway. They could kiss my ass.
The Kentucky Derby article, I guess, introduced Hunter to like the world of gonzo journalism. Could you define exactly what gonzo journalism is?
Gonzo is Hunter didn't actually come up with the word, which is now in all the dictionaries everywhere. I've read every definition in every dictionary there is, and they're all terrible. They're insufficient. They don't come close, and and there's all kinds of Gonzo stuff out now. One of my favorite Muppets is Gonzo, and there's the cartoon character, and there's Gonzo sex, and all kinds of Gonzo stuff. But it has obvious meanings. It's spontaneous, it's wild, it's crazy, it's now. Express yourself now as you are. But Hunter and I had talked about many things, and one was writing. And I worked hard with the head librarian at the main library in Louisville, where Hunter's mom, Virginia, retired as head librarian. Hunter spent a lot of time there with his friends, reading and discussing literature, and he was a serious student of literature. And I convinced that librarian to start a campaign. He got an architect and drew up plans to create an extension to the library and renamed the library the Virginia and Hunter S. Thompson Louisville Free Public Library, and to have an entire section devoted to Hunter. And I was going to talk with Johnny Depp about donating Hunter's archives. Johnny stayed in Hunter's basement for 6 months when he was immersing himself in studying Hunter for his role as Hunter in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And that was a time when Hunter was calling me and sending me fax. Actually, I didn't have a fax machine, so he would send them to Kinko's up Barstown Road, and I would have to go up there and pick them up. And I know the young people who work there loved getting those faxes. But so that fell apart because the city had cutbacks, and instead of getting money that he thought he was going to get, that library director, he didn't. He not only didn't get that money, he didn't get as much he would normally get, and he got a better job and moved on, and there's a new director now. So there was that, and then I brought in Anita Thompson for the first Gonzo Fest in 2010. In 2016, I think it was, I brought in Hunter's only child, Juan, and his wife at the time, Jennifer Deborah Fuller, who took care, incredible lady who took care of Hunter for years. And she's the one who took the photo of Hunter and me, with me holding Hunter's loaded pistol that he kept by his phone. Hunter had several phones, but he had a main phone, which he usually kept on speakerphone. And when I took my family out to visit him in 95, Jack Nicholson called 3 times. And the first time he was just screaming bloody murder, calling Hunter every name in a book, and hung up. And turns out what happened was Jack had flown out to his home in Aspen to watch a heavyweight football fight with Hunter. And Hunter didn't know he'd brought his daughters with him. And Hunter went over and broke out a window and threw a bunch of firecrackers in, like a whole thing of lit firecrackers. And they went off and scared the hell out of Jack's daughters. And so with the third call, though, Jack calmed down, and everything was okay. So that was really weird to be there, and have Jack Nicholson calling. I'm there talking with Hunter S. Thompson about everything in the world. And Deborah Fuller took the photo. Hunter said, "Here, take this. This will get us both into trouble one of these days." And I asked Juan, when Juan moved to Louisville, he showed me all of Hunter's guns. It's a massive collection and some amazing guns. And I asked him if that gun was in there. He said he never got it back from the police. I said that was the gun that Hunter shot himself with. And he said probably it wasn't. He couldn't say for sure, but I figured it was. I'm sure all his guns were loaded all the time.
His best known work is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And, what are your thoughts on that book?
Well, I think it's brilliant. Hunter did for literature. He started doing this actually at the end of Hell's Angels. He veers down a different path, and he talks about the edge. He writes about the edge, and so he's struggling in the coming years, as he always did, with what to write and how to write it. And so I took a deep dive for 7 years, and I worked with Margaret Ann Harrell, who was the editor for Random House of Hell's Angels, and she became really close with Hunter. They had a relationship, and she kept all the original letters. And anyway, we worked together for 7 years and published a book. It was released by a beautiful coffee table size, full color book, The Hell's Angels Letters, The Making of an American Classic, Hunter S. Thompson and Margaret A. Harrell in collaboration with Ron Whitehead. And so I'm able to see the inside story in those letters. If you get a copy, you can read some of it, of that inside story of his struggle. He had already started struggling because they stayed in contact for years and years. And he writes about, he doesn't know, he wants to write a book about the American dream, trying to discover the American dream, in search of the American dream. And that's what Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is all about. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, if you read Joseph Conrad's The Heart of Darkness masterpiece, that's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is America's heart of darkness right there. But Hunter S. Thompson did for literature what quantum physics did for science. He showed that one of the basic premises of the scientific method, objectivity, is erroneous. It's false. Quantum physics has shown us that the experimenter changes the outcome of the experiment. Hunter saw that, and he talked about and wrote about all the facts added up don't never tell the truth. And Hunter was a fiction writer. He wanted to be a fiction writer. He was a fiction writer, and he created this creative nonfiction, this world of bringing realistic history into the world of fiction and mixing it up and putting himself in. A primary way he did that was to put himself in the story, and not just put himself in the story, to allow himself to change the story completely, to cover a motorcycle race, and then have it turn out to talk about so much, the human condition in particular. So you missed out. We're talking about how Hunter did for literature what quantum physics did for science. Okay, so.
And that was he introduced him. He introduced himself as a fictional character, like Raoul Duke.
That's correct.
And then there were, I guess, they consider 2 movies were based on that. The first one being Where the Buffalo Roam, saying it's a very loosely adaptation of it. And then the second one that a lot of people think of is the Terry Gilliam movie with Johnny Depp. Well,
I talked about the Gonzo Fest in 2014, the people I brought in. I also brought in Layla Nabulsi. She's the executive producer of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, the movie. And she was keeping me up to date on her trials and tribulations, the director she was going through. Lawrence Ferlinghetti used to walk down the hill from City Lights to Zoetrope Studios, Francis Ford Coppola's offices there. And he was an advisor for the script. And so I found out a lot of stuff like that. When she told me she had Terry Gilliam, I said, oh shit, you got it now. That's it. That's the magic you've been looking for. And he's one of my favorites.
Just like a very faithful adaptation of it.
Yeah, that's right. And where the Buffalo Roam is fantastic. Bill Murray just does an incredible job. He's one of my favorite actors. But Johnny, I tell you two things. He's just a good guy. I had the great honor last year, 2 years ago, I was named U.S. National Beat Poet Laureate, a great honor for this Kentucky farm boy. At a big ceremony at the National and International Beat Poetry Festival in Connecticut. Last year, I had the honor, I was invited back, and I was named Lifetime Beat Poet Laureate. And I helped introduce with the lady who's the director, Debbie Tolson Kilday, Johnny Depp, who did his acceptance speech via Zoom. We made Johnny a Lifetime Beat Poet Laureate because of his love of the Beat generation and support of the Beat generation. And so I just didn't know. It was like, who can play Muhammad Ali? You know, one of my heroes, one of Hunter's heroes. My dad was a bare knuckle boxer, never lost a fight. He taught my brother and me how to fight. And so we grew up listening to Cassius Clay box on fights on the AM radio on the farm. And then he changed his name, and then he stood up against the war the way he did and put it all on the line, man. That guy's he was a hero to me. And so it's just like, how can anybody play Muhammad Ali? He's so distinct, so original. And Hunter was big on, like I am. There's so many people try to write like Hunter. You can't write like Hunter or anybody else. You can write like yourself, find your own voice, be your own original voice. That's all we wanted. And if we had added that piece onto the library, then we would, the premise would have ways for people to find their own original voice as creative people. So I just didn't see how Johnny could pull it off. Within 5 minutes, I was totally convinced that was Hunter S. Thompson, that Johnny Depp was Hunter S. Thompson. He nailed it. He was so good. And just like I had a great honor, my partner, Jinn, Jinn, Jinn Bug, and I were on Johnny's guest list for when he performed with Jeff Beck at the Louisville Palace. One of Beck's, unbeknownst to anybody, I guess, one of Beck's last concerts, one of the greatest guitarists of all time. Been listening to him since the 60s. And I'm like, to Johnny, when I picked him up at the airport in 96, he had his guitar slung over his shoulder. He's the only person who paid his own way when I produced that event. I paid for everybody else. And Johnny got off the plane. He said, "God damn, it feels good to be home." He loves Kentucky. And so he played at the end of that 4-hour event. Hunter loved my old Kentucky home, so we performed that. I asked my friend David Amram, who's 92 now, what an amazing person. He's still going strong, performing everywhere. I asked him to be music director. David played flute. Johnny Depp played slide guitar. Warren Zevon played grand piano. Susie Wood sang. My old Kentucky home led the audience. A fantastic bluegrass band accompanied her. And so I knew Johnny's first love was music. But I'm thinking, and I listened to a couple of his songs, but I hadn't, and I knew he had Hollywood Vampires and all that. But he's playing with Jeff Beck. Come on. And so we're on Johnny's guest list for this concert, and we go, and the first half of the show is Jeff Beck, and then Johnny comes out. I got to tell you, man, he was powerful, strong. He was so damn good. And so it just impressed the hell out of me and Jen too. So he can do it, and he did it in that movie. He pulled it off.
Pulled it off well.
He's spectacular. Yeah.
And
But and the his co-star Benicio del Toro. I'm getting the filmmaker and the actor confused at the moment. One of my favorite filmmakers. Who was the actor who played Dr. Gonzo?
That was Del Toro.
Who's the famous filmmaker who's influenced by Lovecraft?
Guillermo.
Yeah. So that was throwing me off.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah,
so Johnny ended up buying Hunter's archives. Hunter kept everything from Juan. And so he's got it now. I saw the pictures in the Hollywood, with all the great films of Hollywood, it's stored in the same building. And so I wanted to ask him to bring it to Louisville. And I was hoping that Juan and his son, Will, Hunter's grandson, might be interested in taking over Gonzo Fest and carrying it on, but there's really no interest there. And so I finally just said 26 years is enough. I'm saying that's it for me for this. Anybody else wants to carry the stuff on, go ahead. But I'm moving in new directions now, and thankful for all of it. Okay, what else you want to ask?
One of his, I guess, other famous books is Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail in 1972.
It's like one of the best political coverage stories ever.
It's basically about Nixon running for re-election. And George McGovern being his opponent. And there's a quote from George McGovern that said it was the least factual but most accurate account of it.
And that's Hunter's writing in a nutshell right there. The same applied to pretty much all of Hunter's writing. He saw into things. I had the great honor, I produced with historian Douglas Brinkley, who's the editor of Hunter S. Thompson's letters, which are some of his best writing too. Doug and I produced for August 96, a few months before the Hunter tribute, we produced a 48-hour nonstop music and poetry insomniac-a-thon in New Orleans, at the New Orleans Contemporary Arts Center, the Howlin' Wolf Club, and the Mermaid Lounge. And the first day, George McGovern was there with Amy Carter, President Carter's daughter, and he gave a talk, and I did a TV interview with George McGovern after his talk. I mean, I tried to track it down, but I've been unable to. I would love to have a copy of that TV interview. I haven't.
Interesting one.
I don't know what the hell I said. I have no idea.
Yeah.
It was just such a great honor to meet him and to visit with him some.
There were some. That was a very interesting, I guess, election season, because it was like his running mate Thomas Eagleton, basically had to be removed because it got revealed he had electroshock treatment. And then there was also the rumor that Hunter started about the Ibogan. So I say that pronounced Ibogan, the psychoactive drug for muskie.
Okay. Hunter started the rumor. Hunter started a rumor about muskie. Yeah, it started in Milwaukee, I think.
Yeah, who was also running for presidency as well, Ed Muskie. And
yeah, he fell from the lead. A lot of it, some people think that is because of the rumor. I don't know.
And there was also a letter that was attributed to Muskie, where he's supposed to have written, not blacks, but we have Canucks. And nobody knew exactly what he meant by Canucks. They thought maybe he meant Canadians or something, but they were kind of,
Assume that's.
yeah. But I mentioned these because we'll be discussing them later on in one of the future stories that have been inspired by this novel to do like almost like Lovecraftian type fiction. With Lovecraft, I mean, with Hunter S. Thompson, he's almost become a part of the pop culture. He's made into a Jeopardy answer, and then there's also like Doonesbury, Uncle Duke.
Well, and Jeopardy had Gonzo Fest on there as well. Yeah. And Doonesbury, Hunter hated Doonesbury.
Oh no.
Yeah, he despised it.
He just Was it because of Uncle Duke, or was it because of like something else?
I don't know. I think he felt like he should have got money for it. I really think that was the issue myself.
Yeah.
He was always needing money.
Yeah. He's also been impersonated by other things. There's a comic book called Transmetropolitan, and they have a character named Spider Jerusalem, who's very much like Hunter S. Thompson in the future.
He's like cyberpunk, Hunter S. Thompson.
Yeah. And then the Venture Brothers cartoon has a guy named Hunter Gatherers.
The Hunter Gatherers, I was their featured guest. They came from Maine and New Orleans and Colorado to the 10th and final Gonzo Fest and interviewed people for their program, and they interviewed me.
The Venture Brothers did?
The Hunter Gatherers. Okay. The Hunter Gatherers. I'm not thinking of their names right now, but they asked me if this was the end of an era, and I said, I think it's the beginning. Actually, we've just opened the door now. Things are opening up in academia finally, slowly but surely, as they always do, because academia is a bastion of conservatism, and it's getting worse all the time. It's one reason I finally said, fuck it, and got out of it. Now, you're a professor, right?
That's all ceremonial.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah,
He's unofficial.
Yeah.
Honorary.
He's self-proclaimed.
Yeah. I gave him that title, but it was like,
okay, all right, that's good. Well, Dr. Hunter S. Thompson. So there we go. Yeah, and so I mean, my feeling is about academia, 90% of it's pure bullshit. So, all right, so well, I'm glad to see whatever turns people on to Hunter S. Thompson is okay by me. Because I mean, I've read some of the material that's out there, and I've seen some of this, and some of it's like, well, that's shit. That's terrible. But some of it is like, oh, okay, I dig that. But my feeling is, okay, I'm not a fan of, let's put it in the context of poetry. I'm not a fan of slam poetry. I met Mark Smith, who founded Slam in Chicago. I performed at the Green Mill. He invited me to put a team together, perform at the Nationals. I did. I told him point blank, and my friend Bob Holman, who put Slam on the global map, I told them both that I don't like the notion of poetry being a competition and selecting judges at random from an audience, most of whom don't know anything about poetry. So in the early days, so much of Slam was sex and stand-up comedy. And well, I like both, but I told him, I said, until you get some social commentary going on here, it's not going to be worth much as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, but I told him also, I said, but anything, but I think slam's good in this respect. Anything that turns people onto poetry is a good thing. Anything that turns people onto Hunter S. Thompson is a good thing. So I'm glad to see it all happening. The influences, it's like H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, look at his life, look at his story. 1890 to 1937, I believe, 47 years old when he died. And I mean, what a tragic life mostly, and struggle and torment of one kind or another. And not many people knew about him. And now he's influenced people in most of the creative arts.
Now, did Hunter S. Thompson read any Lovecraft? I knew he read F. Scott Fitzgerald and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Hemingway. Yeah, he typed out their book so it could absorb, assimilate the rhythm into his own writing. And he read widely in a multitude of fields, and my guess is that he did read Lovecraft, but we never talked about it, so it never came up. So I don't know. I mean, I wish if I had known I was going to be on this program, I would have brought his name up.
And there's debate whether Gonzo the Muppet was named in honor of Hunter S. Thompson. What is your side on that?
It obviously was. I mean, I think it's ridiculous to think that he wasn't, but it's never been stated as a fact that he was. So it doesn't really matter. But you look at his behavior, and
Makes a good point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also the beer named in honor of him, the Flying Dug Gonzo beer.
yeah, yeah,
Have
those
you had
cats.
that?
Yeah, those cats were have sponsored some of our Gonzo Fest. The guy, I forget his name, who owns it, the brewery, but they've kept up with us over the years.
And Stedman did the artwork for it as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's one other interesting little, like, I guess, like legacy that Hunter S. Thompson has continued on, or it's been attributed to, the adrenochrome conspiracy that's been going on in kind of like right-wing propaganda. The people are saying like kids are being abducted and having their adrenochrome taken out of them. And so they make the rich and powerful, young and all that. And a lot of them attribute that to like Hunter S. Thompson, his mention of it in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
So what is the group that's passing this information around?
That'd
The
be like
right-
QAnon.
Yeah, I figured it was. That sounds just like QAnon.
Yeah.
God, I read somewhere, I wrote a poem called The Storm Generation Manifesto. I lived in Iceland for 2 years, but I produced with Olafur Gunnarsson, who's is a friend of mine, Iceland's most respected novelist. He's an advisor for the Vikings, a TV program, but he knows everything about Iceland. And so we produced the first and only Beat Generation Festival there in May of 2008 at Storaklop, Big Rock, which is several kilometers outside of Reykjavik. His home, that area there where he lives. And there's a river in front of his property. I called it the Crystal River because I can't pronounce any of the Icelandic Old Norse names that they give everything that everybody has, their names. Iceland is the only Scandinavian country where they still speak Old Norse, the original Viking tongue. And so then across the valley, which the Crystal River flows through, and there's a home for the rooks, the ravens. on a mountain behind Store Clock. Well, I went up there one day and watched all these gigantic nests that the ravens have, and ravens everywhere. My God, it was amazing to see that. So, but there's the Viking Mountain is across the valley from where Olafur lives. And so he told me the legend of the Viking Mountain. Every day they had a Viking climb the mountain because you can see for miles and miles in all directions from up there. So they can see if anybody's coming or not. And so I said, oh shit, I got to climb that. And so 3 days after the festival, he drove me over and dropped me off towards the base of it. And it was mist and rain. And he said, Ron, I just want you to know that several people have been blown off the top of the mountains, so be careful up there. I said, you bastard, you're just telling me that now? Why didn't you tell me before? So I had time to think about it. And so that I would have done it anyway. But anyway, I went on up there, but I was almost blown off at the top. 3/4 of the way up, a big storm came. But I went on to the top, and I was almost blown off 3 times. And I crouched over behind a big rock out of the wind for 15 minutes. I had these epiphanies come over me. And then I took my 1.5-liter bottle of red wine, which is all I had in my backpack, out, and I stood up facing the wind, and I turned it up, and I screamed to the Norse gods, thank you for accepting and embracing me. And I turned it up and I drank half the bottle, and then I made my descent. And then when I got back, I wrote the Storm Generation Manifesto, which is now a lot of different places, have been published a lot. And so I saw, though, that fucking QAnon had used the storm as part of their propaganda. And I'm like, oh my God, you know. So I've been looking for links that they might make to me, thinking, and they may have just gotten it on their own. I hope they did. I hope they didn't get it from my poem. Because, man, I mean, those people, that crap that they come up with that they believed.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's so much crazy, just the stuff that people actually believe today. The flat earther is just for beginners, and go on from there. The world was created 6,000 years ago. The Ark up in northern Kentucky, and all that shit. It's like science is out the window, man. It's just like whoever the leader is can convince his followers of the bullshit, then they believe it. It's like, what happened? How did this happen? I think it started with subliminal advertising, and then Rush Limbaugh, who I call Rush Limbaugh. I think they used subliminal advertising on his programs when conservative radio bought out AM radio across the United States, whatever it's called now. I forget what it's called. I think they started, even though they're not supposed to, use subliminal advertising in their ads on Rush Limbaugh's program. And therefore, we now have all the people who believe some of the ridiculous things that, I mean, good people and intelligent people, but they just believe stuff that is crazy as hell.
Yeah. Anyway, getting back on the subject of the
let's get back. Let's don't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We'll be here.
Anyway, yes. Lovecraft Hunter's inspired a few Lovecraftian stories. And is there something about Lovecraft and Hunter S. Thompson that just worked well together?
Well, fear is what does Cthulhu represent? It represents many things. The ancient ones. Fear, some people believe, is the dominant force in the world. And it is for many people. And it's a way that people are controlled, is through fear tactics. And there's a lot, it's easy to become afraid. There's a lot to be fearful of, especially if I talk about this in my writing in various ways and how to overcome your fears and about facing your fears. And but many writers and filmmakers, as we know, have used the basic elements of Lovecraft's books and of the ancient ones, and created their own dystopias, which we certainly end up in one. In this, we're on the tightrope right now, on the verge, on the edge of between calamity on the one hand and this post-apocalyptic world around the corner? Or do we retain some semblance of humanness, which is about where we are now, even though we live in one of the most violent countries in the world, here in the U.S. But it's a country I love and I'm hopeful for. But where are we going to go next? But the hunter, this is at the heart, like I said, Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness is obviously a primary influence on Hunter's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, with Las Vegas being the heart of American darkness. But Hunter was all he wanted to reveal, he wanted to write about and help America see what path we're going to go down if we don't appreciate nature. He loved nature and he couldn't stand what happened to his own personal environment there in Aspen, part of which happened because he moved there. And then the next thing you know, all these famous people start moving and the prices of properties skyrocketed. And it's like so many settings in Louisville, wherever bohemian artists come in and set up a scene where the main object is to create. And creativity is the energy that makes life worth living, as far as I'm concerned. And then the next thing you know, you've got yuppies, trust fund babies buying up these fucking places that bohemians have created, thinking that they'll be as cool, as hip, as in, as whatever they think as the people who created it. And the next thing you know, the bohemians, the working class, poor creative artists, can't afford to live in those places anymore. And then they move and try to find new homes, apartments, houses, wherever they can. And the scene is over, whatever scene they have created, the goal of which is for everybody to find their own original creative voice. So,
do you feel that Hunter, I guess, took his own life too soon, that if he just held on, that he would have been like kind of got a second wind during this climate we're having right now?
I have no idea, but I have no problem with Hunter committing suicide. I was in I think it was a 30-minute film, On the Road to Hunter. I think is the title of it. I have a couple people looking for it right now. It's an excellent film. After Hunter's death, these three young women from New York stopped in my apartment in Louisville and interviewed me as they were doing. They interviewed a Columbia professor who totally trashed Hunter, who couldn't stand him. He says how despicable Hunter was. He hated his guts and he ruined journalism and all this stuff. And I did nothing but praise Hunter. And people look down their noses at and condemn even people who commit suicide. I think it takes great courage to commit suicide. I've had many conversations with suicide myself, particularly in my earlier years before I started living and being my dream, which is a choice I made. It took me 8 years to build a bridge from where I was to where I wanted to be, to live and be my dream. But Hunter, he decided, Hunter did what he came to do, and he decided it was time to leave. He had talked about suicide throughout his life at various times, and his health was declining rapidly because of drug and alcohol abuse. And he didn't want to be a burden on anybody, especially and including himself. And he had always been proud of his vigorous I wouldn't call it youth, but just being healthy and strong. And he had lost that. I'll tell you, no, I think Hunter's best books, even though he, like what he wrote after 9/11 is prescient as anything he ever wrote. And he was, he saw what was coming. In Hell's Angels, he predicts the state of affairs that we dwell in today with the present political environment that we have today, and in other writings of the 60s, and then later as well. He saw the stuff coming.
Now, did you read any of the stories where he's like in the fighting off the encountering Lovecraftian horrors? Did you read any of them?
Yeah, I read a couple of them. I watched some of the film.
There was like Huntress Thompson, The Chronicles of Cthulhu, which is like, I'm gathered it's supposed to be like a 5-part story, but only 2 of them ever got posted.
Yeah.
It seemed like it was a kind of an interesting thing, but I didn't know exactly where it was going.
Yeah.
And then we have
it's hard for me when, and it's just something personal that I have to. I mean, so many young people will come to these stories and they don't know who the hell Hunter S. Thompson is. So they see the story and they don't know anything about it, about him, his work. And so I try to keep that in my mind when I look at some of this new work. And some of these folks are famous people who do comic books, who do graphic novels. There's a French graphic artist who just stopped by and interviewed me. He's touring the United States. His new book on searching for Hunter S. Thompson. That's not the title. I forget the title. It's all in French. Will be coming out soon, and more power to all these people. I appreciate that. It's just like when I think of so many of the great writers of all time: William Blake, James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, Walt Whitman, to name a few. Most of them were undiscovered in their lifetimes. They were known by some people, but somewhere down the road after they died, somebody wrote a biography, sometimes as long as 70 years later. Somebody wrote a biography, the word started getting out, and then it spread. And next thing you know, major influences occur, like they have with Lovecraft. But most poets and writers, and that's why I tell people all the time, I don't even think about money. I have my basic needs, and there are things, I'm anti-materialistic by choice. I want to live as simply as possible. My primary focus is my writing, and the time that Jen and I spend together, the time I can spend in nature. I love nature, and I have a little writing cottage. I'm turning the yard into a flower and tree garden for the bees and the butterflies and me. I live close to miles of walking trails along the Ohio River, and it's a major de-stressor for me to get out in that nature. But my feeling is, my hope is that some of these people who are using Hunter as a vehicle for their story, and some of them are, that they will immerse themselves fully in his work and reach as deep an understanding as possible so they can make a good, just as I hope they do with Lovecraft, so they can make a legitimate association through their storytelling, through their original storytelling. I don't disrespect.
The one novel by Brian Keene and Nick Mamatas, The Damned Highway, Fear and Loathing in Arkham. I was curious what you thought of that one, where they captured the voice of Hunter.
Yeah, I don't. The only person I know of who's been able to really carry off the Hunter voice is Johnny Depp. But I appreciate other people trying. I have no desire to even try to sound like Hunter S. Thompson or Muhammad Ali or you or anybody else. People ask me all the time, if you could be whoever you would like to be, who would you be? I just say, you're looking at him. I don't want to be anybody else. I never did.
What'd you think of I guess Ted Levine as Thomas Blackburn in the Banshee chapter?
I just don't. I think it's all interesting. I don't know. I wish I had more to say about all of that. What other question do you have?
Well, my end question was going to be, what do you think of all these associations with Lovecraft? Do you feel that this is something just needs to be, you feel like it needs to be developed more, or just like, this is a passing fad, time to move on to something else?
Well, no, I think it should be developed as much as people are inspired to develop it. And people like Ridley Scott, for example, just one example, one of my favorite movie makers, directors. Go on and be inspired and produce the beautiful work. But yeah, I don't have too much to say about that. I just Lovecraft, I'll say this to close things out. The basic difference between Hunter S. Thompson and H.P. Lovecraft is that they lived two distinctly different lives and had and held similarities in view expressed through their writing, in particular related to fear and loathing. Hunter made a clear distinction between not a dystopia and a utopia, but certainly the possibility of everything going to hell and some semblance of a decent life, whereas Lovecraft didn't seem to hold much hope. Like Burroughs,
more hopeful then.
He's a lot more hopeful. Lovecraft has a lot more in common with William S. Burroughs, who I was blessed to do the next to last interview with. But he ended up saying love is all there is, his last words in a journal entry. So.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you all. Thanks. It's good to hang out.
Yeah, yes. And before we let you go, what's your latest project you're working on?
Well, I'm always working on a number of projects simultaneously. I got a new book that just came out, a hardback. Let's see, The Great Blue Heron of Quasar Poetry, New and Selected Works, 19 92 to 2022, a 30-year period of time. That book is available, but also there's a film, a new film that's just released that's now available on Amazon Prime Film Documentaries. It's titled Outlaw Poet, The Legend of Ron Whitehead, that was in over 10 years in production. And there's a section on Hunter S. Thompson and that official tribute, unseen footage in that film. And it tells a story about, there's some wild stories in it. I didn't have anything to do with the production of it, but the young people, the three production companies, one Primary, one Storm Generation Films, then Dark Star TV, then another one. They did a fantastic job. And they captured some old footage that Mama took some Super 8 video of the Beaver Dam Rocking Chair Marathon, in which I participated in July of 1973 and rocked in a rocking chair from Saturday morning till Wednesday morning. I rocked 89 hours and 55 minutes. And so I wrote a book about it, and I listened to everybody's stories. And
it's a really crazy book.
There's some footage.
It's I don't know how to even describe it. It's more than just about a rocking chair. There's a lot more that goes on, and kind of the wild tangents you go on as well with that story with it.
Well, it's a deep book. Well, I worked with a publisher in New York City, Grove Atlantic, the head editor there for 3 years. He flew to Kentucky and took back the manuscript, which I'd gotten up to 1,000 pages, and he would send me back entire pages X'd out, 2 experimental, and another page circled. This is okay. And I finally realized he wanted an Erskine Caldwell Tobacco Road, which is a great book. I like that book, but I wanted to show in that book that Kentucky is not a land. It's not just a bunch of idiots. It's a complex and beautiful place with a vast array of complicated characters. And so I tell many stories about many people in that book. And I combine all the elements of grammar, in that book, of poetry and literature, just to fuck with academics. That was one of my goals in writing that book. I edited it down to about 200 pages in those 3 years I was working with this editor. So that did pay off in that regard. And then the small press brought it out. And I said, if y'all publish it exactly the way I've edited it down, then yes. And they did. Tilt the World Press, and they're now defunct. As most small presses go, they don't last long. But so,
isn't that what got you nominated for a Nobel Prize in Literature?
That was one of them, but Dr. John Rocco was a professor at State University of New York Maritime, a Herman Melville scholar, a James Joyce scholar, the author of many books, including The Doors Companion, The Sonic Youth Companion, and others. He reviewed one of my books for a magazine, The American Voice, I believe. And so he just started following me and writing rave reviews of every new release. And he nominated me for a Nobel Prize in 2006. That was an honor.
You got beat out by Harold Pinter, if I remember correctly.
Probably. I don't know.
I think that's who I talked to the guy who nominated you, and I think he said Harold Pinter was the one who beat you. So you know.
Oh, that sounds right. Yeah, Harold Pinter. Yeah, won that year.
All right. Anyway, thank you for coming aboard.
Hey, thank you all. Yeah. Have a good one.
You too.
Honored to be on.
Before we sign off, I forgot forgot to mention in our last episode that we're on Strange Shadows podcast.
Oh, right.
The season 2, episode 9, where we talk about Return of the Sorcerer, which was definitely a very fun episode. I really enjoyed being on there, and we got into the subject of rugs and Oyudines for quite a bit. And for the episode 10, you can hear me reading the opening to the paragraph for the City of the Singing Flames. And much to my embarrassment, I was also in the Innsmouth Book Club episode 72. My embarrassment because I forgot to inform y'all about it, so that y'all enjoy.
You wanted them all to yourself.
Yeah, yes, it was. I was being selfish. I actually almost forgot about it, and I appeared quite late on there as well. But it was an episode done in honor of H.P. Lovecraft's birthday, and so that was quite fun. And so, David, Richard, and Ron, I see the stars are no longer right. We must cease all discussion until they align again next month. 30 plus minutes of H.P. Lovecraft is sponsored by the new summer blockbuster film Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, starring Johnny Depp reprising his role as Hunter. This podcast is created in association with LovecraftPod.com and Logan's Speculative Fiction Group, with help from the Logan County Public Library and the Great Old Ones. Special thanks for Katie Tyson for being the Hell's Angel on the Sonic Highway, and Joshua Dukes for the Snot Level. Until we meet again, may you avoid Princess Cthulhu's decadent and depraved Kentucky Derby.
See y'all. Bye. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye.